The music was loud, and the money felt endless. In the late 1920s, ordinary people believed they had found a magic trick to get rich. They poured their small paychecks into the stock market, hoping to double their money overnight. Shoeshine boys, teachers, and factory workers all bought pieces of big companies. They did not know they were building a fragile house of cards. The market looked like a solid wall of wealth, but it was hollow inside. Banks made the danger even worse by handing out easy loans. People bought stocks with borrowed cash, a risky game called buying on margin. If a stock cost $100, a buyer only needed to put down $10. The bank covered the rest. As long as prices went up, everyone won, but this meant the entire country was swimming in hidden debt. The desire for quick riches blinded them to the trap they were walking into. Then came the autumn of 1929. The grand illusion shattered. Stock prices stopped climbing and started to drop. A wave of fear washed over the trading floor. On a dark Tuesday in October, that fear turned into blind panic. Everyone tried to sell their stocks at the exact same time. There were no buyers, only desperate sellers. The 1929 stock market crash wiped out billions of dollars in a matter of hours. The magic trick was over. The crash was a giant earthquake, and the shockwaves moved fast. The damage did not stay in New York. It rushed out to every town and city in the country. The imaginary wealth vanished into thin air, leaving real debts behind. People who thought they were rich woke up with nothing. The numbers on the big boards in the city flashed red, signaling the start of a very dark time. The great economic machine simply stopped working. The sickness quickly spread to the local banks. Those banks had taken the money regular people saved for the future and gambled it on the failing market. When the market broke, the banks lost everything. They did not have the cash to give back to their customers. The system was built on trust, and that trust evaporated overnight. The rules that were supposed to keep money safe were completely useless against the rising tide of fear. Rumors flew through neighborhoods like wildfire. Frightened families ran to their local branches, hoping to pull out their life savings. They formed long, anxious lines around the block. But when they reached the front, they found locked doors and empty vaults. The bank failures were brutal and final. A lifetime of hard work, saved penny by penny, was just gone. Mothers and fathers wept in the streets, holding worthless paper passbooks. The quiet desperation grew louder each day. Without banks to lend money, businesses could not pay their workers. Factories shut off their machines and locked their gates. Stores boarded up their windows. The Great Depression had officially arrived, and it brought a crushing wave of job losses. Men who had worked proudly for decades were suddenly told to go home. But there was no money waiting for them at home, and no food in the pantry. Mass unemployment changed the face of the country. Millions of people lost their jobs, and the shame was unbearable. Fathers left their houses every morning pretending to go to work just to hide the truth from their children. They walked the streets all day begging for any small task. They offered to sweep floors or chop wood for a simple meal. The proud spirit of a booming nation was broken, replaced by hunger and endless waiting. Long lines formed in every major city, but these were not lines for banks. They were bread lines. Hungry men in worn-out suits stood in the freezing cold, waiting for a single bowl of watery soup and a piece of crusty bread. Charities ran out of food. City governments ran out of money. The human cost was staggering. Families lost their homes and were forced to build crude shacks out of scrap wood and rusty metal. These grim little towns of homeless people popped up everywhere, mocking the leaders who had promised lasting wealth. The government in Washington seemed frozen, unable to grasp the size of the disaster. Leaders told the public that things would fix themselves, that business would naturally bounce back. But the free market had failed completely. The old ways of running the country were useless against a crash of this size. The safety nets simply did not exist. While the cities choked on poverty, a different kind of nightmare was unfolding out in the country. The pain of the Depression was not limited to empty factories and crowded streets. Out on the vast plains, nature itself seemed to turn against the people. Farmers had spent years pushing the land to its absolute limits. They ripped up deep-rooted grasses to plant more wheat, chasing the same easy money that had doomed the stock traders. Then the rains stopped. A terrible drought baked the middle of the country. The overworked soil dried up and turned into loose, lifeless powder. Without the native grass to hold the earth down, the land was completely defenseless. The same blind greed that wrecked the financial system had now wrecked the environment. The farmers watched the sky every day, praying for a single drop of water. But the sky stayed clear, and the ground cracked open. The wind began to blow, picking up the dry dirt. Massive clouds of dust rolled across the plains, turning day into pitch black night. These black blizzards swallowed entire towns. The Dust Bowl had begun, creating a hell on earth. The storms were so thick that people could not see their own hands in front of their faces. Dirt blew through the cracks in windows, covering beds and dinner tables in a thick gray blanket. The human suffering out west matched the misery of the city breadlines. Children breathed in the fine dirt, getting sick with deadly dust pneumonia. Animals choked and died in the fields. The crops were totally ruined, buried under hills of sand. Farmers who had worked the land for generations lost everything they had. The banks, desperate for money, came and took their farms away. Families had no choice but to pack up and run. Thousands of ruined farming families loaded their few belongings onto rickety trucks. They hit the road, heading west toward the promise of green fields in California. They were called Okies, a cruel name for desperate people. They traveled along dusty highways, hungry and exhausted. When they finally reached the West, they found no warm welcome. They found only closed borders, angry locals, and camps filled with sickness. The American dream had turned into a wandering nightmare. The sheer scale of the ruin forced a massive change in Washington. The old leaders were pushed out by an angry, exhausted public. In 1932, the country voted for a new president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He promised to take bold action to stop the bleeding. The nation held its breath, waiting to see if his promises were just empty words. The government finally realized it could no longer stand by and watch its people starve. The new leader moved with lightning speed. His first step was to attack the panic at the banks. He declared a national bank holiday, forcing every single bank in the country to close its doors for a few days. Government workers rushed in to check the books. Only the honest, healthy banks were allowed to reopen. It was a bold shock to the system. The goal was simple: make people believe their money was safe again. This aggressive rescue plan was the start of the New Deal. It was a massive wave of new laws and programs designed to fix the broken country. The government stopped waiting for businesses to hire people. Instead, the government became the biggest boss in the land. It started hiring millions of jobless men to do hard, physical work. The plan was to put money back into empty pockets and put food back on empty tables. The impact of a steady paycheck was deeply emotional. Men who had felt worthless for years finally had a reason to wake up early. They put on heavy boots and grabbed shovels. They went out to build huge dams, pave thousands of miles of roads, and plant millions of trees to stop the blowing dust. They were not just building parks and bridges, they were slowly rebuilding their own crushed pride and putting their families back together. The New Deal also brought tough new rules for Wall Street. The wild, lawless days of the stock market were over. The government created strict police forces to watch the traders and stop the crazy gambling that caused the crash. They also created a special insurance plan for the banks. If a bank failed now, the government promised to pay the regular people their money back. The goal was to make sure a total collapse never happened again. Even with all these massive changes, the deep wounds of the Depression did not heal quickly. The new programs helped millions survive, but they did not completely cure the sick economy. Unemployment stayed painfully high for years. Many families remained trapped in deep poverty, struggling to stretch every single penny. The dark shadow of the crash was too huge to erase with just a few years of government spending. The country was still limping. The true end of the economic freeze came from outside the country. As the 1930s closed, the drums of war began to beat loudly in Europe and Asia. The looming threat of World War II forced the government to build weapons, ships, and airplanes at an incredible speed. Suddenly, every factory was needed. Every worker was needed. The terrible machine of war finally pushed the Great Depression into the past, sparking a massive wave of new jobs. But the people who lived through those dark years never really forgot the pain. The fear of losing everything stayed with them for the rest of their lives. They hid cash under their mattresses. They saved bits of string and pieces of tinfoil. They taught their children to never trust the banks completely and to always prepare for the worst. The deep emotional scars of the crash became a permanent part of the national mind. Today, we look back at that era and ask a chilling question. Could another collapse like the Great Depression happen again? The wild greed that caused the 1929 disaster still exists in modern markets. People still chase easy wealth, and hidden risks still pile up in the shadows. We have stronger safety nets now. built from the hard lessons of the past, but those nets are only as strong as the people guarding them. The story of the Depression is a permanent warning. It shows exactly what happens when blind greed outruns common sense. It reveals the devastating human cost when the systems meant to protect us fail completely. The ruined farms, the empty banks, and the hungry lines of the past are not just old history. They are a mirror reflecting the fragile nature of our own wealth. The ghosts of that broken market still walk among us today,